two writers, one just starting out, the other a bestseller. Join James Blatch and Mark Dawson and their amazing guests as they discuss how you can make a living telling stories. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Hello, welcome. Do you know, last time, well not last time, but at some point when we were recording, somebody emailed us to say that we have to get rid of paper cups. We should get mugs.
Oh, okay.
So, SPF mugs, obviously. Can we afford them?
We've already got a couple of mugs in SPF.
Yeah, there's one of them sitting down there. These are British mugs with a Union flag on them. Loungers Coffee. I don't know where this. That's the Cozy Club, which is a little looks like a private members club. It's obviously styled on that 1930s type of feel. In Salisbury, it's rather nice, isn't it? We've eaten there a couple of times.
We have, yep. It's one of my regulars.
Yeah, and surely you've got an actual club as well. Are you a member of a club?
I'm not a member of a club, no. Was it that Winston Churchill said about clubs?
No, that was Groucho Marx.
He
wouldn't be a member of any club that had him.
Very true.
I think it was Groucho, and someone will look it up and tell us who said that. But we are going to move on from the launch, which we talked about last week, and surely you can find a club membership fee out of the 28,000 you cleared in profit last time. We are going to talk about, should we call it the beast, the large looming single organisation that
the £800 gorilla.
The £800 gorilla, yes, because we talk about lots of retailers and we talk about lots of services, but there is one name. If you're an indie publisher, frankly, if you're a traditional publisher now as well, that's a very important name in your life, and that is Amazon. So Amazon, we don't know huge amounts about it, do we? Just this company that is there when we turn on our computers, started by a guy called Jeff Bezos a few years ago, who thought that people buying stuff on the computer would be the future. And
he started with books.
And he was right.
He was absolutely right, yes.
It was books, wasn't it? Yes.
Yeah, and now, of course, everything is possible with Amazon.
As you know from your affiliate sales, everything and anything is possible.
Yes, I've had all kinds of things bought on Amazon, which we won't go into here as a child-friendly podcast, but I've had some interesting...
things that can keep a relationship alive.
So I'm told.
And some expensive wristwatches.
Yes, that's true. So Amazon. So I've known Darren, we went to London to interview. I've known Darren for a couple of years now, and it's quite a funny story how I kind of got to know Darren. I started to sell pretty well in 2014, so that was when I was still employed, when we were all working together in the same place, watching movies for a living, and I was doing quite well, and Darren reached out to me, and I think they noticed that I was selling quite strongly, and they reached out to me and said, "Is there any way that we can work together to you can help you sell a few more books?" So of course that sounded good to me. So we started to work together, and as the year progressed, we got to November, and I remember this very vividly. I stopped working on the 24th of November 2014 and went to do this full time, and literally an hour after I handed in my notice. This would be in October. I finished in November, so I handed in my notice a month before. An hour or so after I went into the boss's office and said, "Look, thanks very much. You can stick your job." I didn't put it quite like that. Darren called me and said, "Hi, Darren. It's Darren from Amazon."
Was he confused when he called you?
He was as confused as I am right now. He said, "Hi, Mark. It's Darren from Amazon, and I'm afraid we've got a bit of a problem with your account." So I'm thinking, okay, my wife's on maternity. I've just basically jacked my job in. What on earth is the problem? And he said, "Well, if you check your bank account, I think you'll find we've overpaid you this month." And I was expecting him to say by maybe a few pounds. It was by something like £60,000. It was a huge amount of money. And anyway, we just it was all fine. But basically they were very flexible, so it was paid. I didn't earn any extra royalties for about 2 or 3 months,
right? As
that was recouped effectively
in advance.
It was effectively an advance, yeah. They were really relaxed about it, and you'll hear from when we speak to Darren that he's a very laid back guy and a lovely guy. So I've met him lots of times now. I've since I've gone full time. I've spoken at the London Book Fair 2 times. I'll be speaking with Amazon again in March this year. I've been to Dublin to do an event with them, Darren, again, and I've spoken at an Amazon Academy event in London. So we see each other a fair amount, and the other staff at Amazon who are equally lovely. And it's fair to say, I think that Amazon has changed my life. It is the company that I started to do well on, first of all. And I have a very fond space in my heart for them, because they did enable me to do what I've always wanted to do, and that's tell stories and entertain people. And although I get amazing support now from the other platforms, especially Apple and Kobo, who I love as well, the guys there are fantastic, Amazon is still about 70% of my income comes from Amazon. So I'm a big Amazon backer, unashamedly so, and we can talk about some of the things that people say about Amazon perhaps after we've listened to the interview, because not everyone loves Amazon. In fact, far from it. Some people actively dislike them. I'm certainly not one of those people, and we can have a chat about their role in the industry, the responsibilities that come with being by far the biggest player. But I think it'd be good to do that after we've spoken to Darren.
So Mark and I have been released from captivity, haven't we? We've come to the City of London, and one of Amazon's buildings here in the UK. It's rather nice inside, and this is a place you've been before, I think, Mark?
I have, yes, because Audible are here, and A Publishing are here as well, APUB, so yeah, I've been here a few times.
Yeah, and Amazon, the beast at the centre of the publishing industry in the world now. His beast sounds like a slightly negative tone, but let's bring in Darren Hardy, who we're here to talk to today. So Darren, the manager of KDP in the UK.
That's right, yes. I've never been called a beast before.
No, the beast of publishing. There you go. It's something for your business card. Well, look, thank you very much for coming onto the podcast. Amazon is such a big feature in our writers' lives. There are a number of platforms, but the word beast probably does describe the place Amazon has, right? Culturally, it's right at the centre, isn't it now?
Well, I think certainly programs like Kindle Direct Publishing, as you say, have had a huge impact for authors. So I think, we hear lots of enthusiastic response about what we're doing. Clearly, Kindle Direct Publishing is in the heart of what a lot of authors are doing, which is great. So long may that continue.
Good. Well, we've got a few questions for you, Mark. Some from us, some from our listeners. And I'm going to try and bring it back occasionally to newbie language, because I don't necessarily understand. I haven't published my first book yet, so there's choices about Kindle Select and all the rest of it. It's not, I can't even get the terminology right, but you know what I mean. KDP Select.
That's exclusivity on the one hand with Amazon, or going wide with everyone.
Yeah, I'm getting into lingo like going wide. So I may interrupt every now and again and say, what are you talking about? But where are we going to start? Because I know we want to get through as much as we can in the time we've got.
Yeah, I think it would be really interesting to talk to Darren about his time at Amazon, because obviously I've known Darren for a little while now. And I mentioned in the introduction the phone call you made to me the day I handed in my notice about there being a problem with my account, which was possibly the first time we'd spoken, but that was not the most auspicious start. But since then, we've been to conferences together and spoken on stage, and so it's been great. Now, I know that Darren has been at Amazon for a very long time, so probably one of the earliest UK employees. Would that be fair to say?
I've been at Amazon for about 13 years, so certainly not the earliest, but one of in that sort of initial group of people that have been around for a little bit of time. But I've always worked in bookselling in one form or another. So fresh out of university, I did that classic thing of not quite knowing what it was I wanted to do with my life, working in the local bookshop while I sort of made my decisions, and just falling in love with books and falling in love with the sort of idea of authors exchanging ideas and just the huge amount of variety within the sort of publishing world. And so here I am, 2017, looking after KDP.
I'm 13 years, that must be a long service award at Amazon. Did you get a cup?
No, I don't think so. No, nothing quite like that. It's one of those things actually that surprised me. I think one of the amazing things about at publishing, not just Amazon, but especially about Amazon, is there are so many things happening. There's so many new things coming along and changes that actually it often surprises me when I say, yes, I've been here for this amount of time, because in some ways it feels like only yesterday. And there's sort of no sense of, I've worked worked at other businesses for shorter periods of time, and you sort of sometimes feel that that's, you've been there a while. But it sounds a bit of a cliche, but I genuinely do sort of skip into work in the morning thinking actually there's some really fun things going to happen, and I get to meet Mark and people like that all the time, which is one of the great things about my role is working so closely with so many authors and people within the publishing industry. So yeah, it's great fun.
So 13 years ago you came to Amazon for the first time, so that would have been pre-Kindle,
Yes.
pre-KDP. So how long have you actually been involved with the Kindle side of things?
So I've been working in the Kindle Direct Publishing side for about 3 years now, 3.5 years, and I used to work on the print book side, so I was sort of in the publisher relations team on that side of the business. And just wanted to do something slightly different. I mean, I for me personally, working within books and within publishing is absolutely what I love doing. But obviously moving from the sort of printed books world and the sort of managed, traditionally published world into Kindle was a very different thing, and then coming into Kindle Direct Publishing was sort of different all over again. So it enabled me to sort of continue within the industry, but to do some different things. And as I say, I haven't really sort of looked back. It's been really interesting.
How did you feel about the Kindle when it came out? Because I've said before that I wasn't an early adopter by any means. I was probably reluctant to read on a device. I love books. I love the smell of books and the touch and the feel of them. But now that's completely changed. I read everything on my Kindle. Did you feel the same way as you came across?
Yes, I mean, not as reluctance. For me, I mean, I've always been surrounded by books, and my parents and my family are absolutely immersed in books. But one of the things that I was always very conscious of is some of my relatives, some of my family, weren't lucky enough to be near a bookshop, or weren't lucky enough to, for my sort of older family, to actually be able to go into a bookshop. And so one of the things I was really conscious of was that the Kindle really did open the door to access to books. Really did make it so much easier to get books. And I grew up in that generation where things like music and film were a very sort of physical product, and you'd have to wait. You'd have to sort of wait until you could go into a town and sort of buy the new album, buy your favourite band, or buy the new book, and so on. And that immediacy and the ease was just sort of mind-blowing, and you could see that from day one. And obviously the device itself has gone through several different iterations, but that whole sort of ease of access and the ability to be able to sort of just download within 60 seconds and sort of get the book that you want to read, I think was self-evident from the very first stages. And I remember thinking, if for some of my relatives who find it harder to get to a bookshop, or those kind of situations, it would be brilliant for them.
It's one of the things that it's very easy for us to take for granted now. And I downloaded and started to read a book on the train this morning as I was coming into London, and it's easy because that's become common behaviour now to forget how revolutionary that would have seemed even 10 years ago. The idea that you could do that, you'd have been burned as a witch probably if you were to suggest that. So when you started, you would have been out in Slough, I guess.
Yes, indeed. Yes, in Slough.
What did John Betjeman say about Slough?
Yeah, come friendly bombs. Yeah.
So I've been to the Slough office in another life before I was writing. Not to meet you, but to meet the guys in the video team, and that was a very different office to the sleek and shiny building that we're in now, and the main building in Holborn. So how have you found that? How have things changed, perhaps organisationally, as the time has gone past?
Well, obviously the business has grown in size quite significantly over that time, and I think one of the amazing things, and you mentioned earlier, sort of when I first started at Amazon, the products that Amazon sold was a far smaller product group of categories and so on. It's just grown phenomenally, but then not only in terms of retail, but then in terms of things like web services and some of the video side of things. It's just mind-blowing just how many sort of different aspects there are to the business. And as an employee, obviously you become conscious of growing size, and people coming into the teams all the time. But I think the great thing is there's a real sense of excitement and momentum and new opportunities. And one of the great things I think for many of the things that we do is that you sort of identify an opportunity to try and help customers better, or to try and help authors better. You get feedback. If only we could, as an author, do something. The particular thing is to be able to sort of try and see what we can do about that, where we feel like there's an opportunity to add value. And so that shows no signs of slowing down, and you sort of think about all the innovation and all the change going on over the period of time that I've been here, for example, and you would think, for many people, okay, surely that's it now, it's time to start sort of leveling off and sort of just stick with what we've got. But I don't think there's any sign of that here, and when you just look at all the changes going on in the publishing space, there's still so much to do and so many opportunities.
Yeah, and as James and I, as we said before we started rolling today, Alexa is a very exciting new technology, just rolled out yesterday with the Fire Stick. There's lots of opportunities for readers and writers there as well. But maybe things will develop over the next few months and years.
How does that innovate? How does a large company, because Amazon's now a very large company on a corporate level, how does it keep that culture of innovation going? Because that's the big trick that lots of the other older companies are really struggling with. They struggle to keep as fresh as they were when their forefathers started it.
Yes, it's really interesting, and people have written books about exactly that. It's a fascinating aspect of it. I think from my experience, often you'll hear reference about Amazon leadership principles and things like that. There are certain values that the business works to that have been there from day one and continue to be there. And I think one of the amazing things is that is a sort of a living, breathing sort of set of principles that do sort of get referred to on a day-by-day basis and are often sort of used to help sort of solve problems. Or
so it's not just a plaque on the wall in reception, it's something you live by.
Yes, that's it. And I think we often get asked that when we have people come in for interviews, for example. It's obviously recruitment clearly is something that Amazon does a lot of, and often within the interview, candidates will ask, what is this? These Amazon leadership principles. I've heard about these. What does it really mean? And we often will talk about the fact that this is a genuine sort of real, living, breathing sort of set of values that the company works to. Making sure your customer is at the heart of what you do. Try and be innovative, try and sort of keep things simple, and I think that's what helps. That keeps the momentum going, because they are tried and tested. They work really well for the Amazon business, and I think have been sort of fundamental in many of the things that you've seen.
Yeah.
When you say you use the word customer a few times, right? Amazon is notoriously, that's the wrong word, but it's famous for being customer centric. Yeah. So who is your customer? Is it the reader or is it the writer?
I think it's both, and many other customer types. And I think that's obviously, as a retail business, there is a sort of retail customer who buys products on the retail website. But then when it comes to a business sort of group like Kindle Direct Publishing, authors are obviously fundamental in what we do. And there's a huge amount of focus in the way that people will talk publicly about the customer retail focus, huge amount of focus in the author as our customer. What can we do better? Where are we really helping? What are the opportunities ahead of us? And so I think it's one of those things where we have a slightly sort of split view on that. Clearly, to help serve our customers as best as possible as authors, we also need to serve our retail customers as well.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned the team. So how big is the team for KDP in London now?
Well, it's one of those interesting aspects of life here is that actually the team is quite geographically spread. So there's a sort of handful of us in the London office, but equally we work very closely with colleagues in Luxembourg. There are obviously a number of businesses around Europe that work very closely. So I spend a lot of time talking to my counterparts in Germany and France. Sort of, what's working well, what can we improve, what are we hearing from authors. Similarly, in the US, obviously there's a very large sort of industry over there. And I think it was one of the things that we try and do is sort of learn from each other, as well as spending a lot of time hearing from authors, is also spending a lot of time talking internally about what's going on in your particular area, and can we learn from that. And even things that you hear from individual authors, it may be the first time you've heard something maybe from an author in France, but perhaps that's a question that is equally relevant to the UK. So there's a real sort of global focus, I think, and I think many authors are taking exactly that kind of perspective now. The technology and the tools that are available mean that, whereas in the past you might have considered yourself as an author to publish into the UK, for example, it's now just as easy to publish into Australia, into the US, into sort of countries all around the world. So why not cast your net as widely as you can to learn about readers in all of those countries as well? And so I think it's a similar process for us.
Yeah, that's really true. And then, I mean, something that I've discovered over the course of the last few years, 65% of my readers are in the States, so I'm publishing obviously in the UK, but the vast majority are in the US. And I don't know if you guys know, there's a piece of software called Book Report. It's definitely worth checking. It's a clever little piece of it's a bookmarklet that you go into the KDP dashboard where the reports are, and it will pull that data from the Amazon servers and present it in a very visual fashion, and it's the insights you can get out of it are fantastic. So I have 2.5% of my sales in Australia, which I didn't know. So I'm going to focus my marketing on that as we go forwards. Yeah. So, go on, James.
Well, I was going to say, we talked about innovations and the heart of Amazon. So, should we talk about one or two of the innovations of recent? I mean, really hot off the press. Literally, the press is the change in print side of things. So, obviously, Amazon acquired CreateSpace a few years back, whenever that was, an eon in Amazon terms, and we've looked at that, and our students are familiar with that process. What is the change that's just been announced?
So, the main way of thinking about it is that in the past, as an author, you would have signed up to Kindle Direct Publishing, and the Kindle Direct Publishing would have taken care of your digital publishing, and you would then separately signed up to CreateSpace, and that CreateSpace service would have taken care of your print book sales. Now, basically, you can access both of those things within Kindle Direct Publishing. So Kindle Direct Publishing is the service that will enable you to print digitally and in print. And some of the benefits of that include things like consolidated reporting, for example. So you'll go to KDP and you'll have reporting that will combine both of your print sales and your digital sales. And a lot of the publishing process is made a lot simpler by the fact that you are going through a sort of a simple workflow, if I can call it that, with a clear sort of here's your ebook details and here are your print book details. And so you're not having to go backwards and forwards between two different systems. You can do it all within the same user interface, as we'd call it, the same sort of website. And so from our perspective, and the feedback that we're getting is that from authors saying it's just so much simpler. It's just so much easier to go into one place and do all of it in one go and get that one set of reports. So as you say, we've just sort of announced that this beta is ongoing, but there will obviously be changes and updates to come as we go along. So, watch the space. Keep looking at the website. You'll see new features coming on as we can add them, and send us your feedback.
And the fee structure will be comparable, will it, for authors?
In terms of the sort of structure of publishing, none of that's changed. So, all of your royalty rates are the same. Essentially, it's sort of consolidating what's already there.
Do you think? I mean, I'm definitely impressed with the bringing that under one dashboard. It's just the fact that you see the data more often means you're more likely to focus on the data and concentrate on developing it. Do you think, most of my books are on CreateSpace, do you think it's likely that those will be consolidated so that the data will be available under the KDB dash in a year or two's time?
Yeah, I mean, with any beta, obviously, the service is there as is at the moment. We're aware that there are things that we'll be adding, over time. I think, wherever there are pain points or inefficiencies from an author perspective, we would always be looking to sort of see what we can do about those. So, yeah, I think the key thing with those kind of questions is sort of sign up, sort of give it a go, see how it works for you. Let us know what you think, and we'll continue to sort of build on it over time.
Okay, so you're in an unusual position in that you've got this bird's eye view of indie publishing and have done for some time. Obviously, I was on the radio. Amazon very kindly have put me forward for press things, and I was on the radio not too long ago. And one of the first questions I got was from the host. Was very polite, but it was basically, I don't know who you are, and I could have answered that in a number of ways, but I answered it as politely as I could. But how do you think perception of independent publishing has changed over, say, the last 5 years?
It's really interesting because I think as an industry we talk a lot about the difference between traditional publishing, independent publishing and all of those kind of things. From a reader's perspective, I don't think there's a huge amount of awareness or concern, to be honest, about that sort of split. I think the key thing is, can I read a good book? is this an author I particularly like? And how that author chooses to publish the book, I think is relatively immaterial. So I think we as an industry spend a lot of time discussing these things. I think from a reader's perspective, actually, it's not really that important. But I think what is becoming a sort of growing awareness within the industry is just how easy it is and how much impact you can have as an independently published author. And I should imagine many aspiring authors will always, you're thinking, okay, I'm going to write a book. How do I go about it? So you're on various searches, you'll read various articles and all of those kind of things. And I think you can see a real sort of sense within that sort of commentary that independent publishing is becoming so successful that many authors are just sort of getting on with it and almost not spending a huge amount of time debating about which way to go. It's like, well, I can do this now, I can do it really quickly independently publishing, so that's the route I'm going to try. And I think that sort of helps build that success. And I mean, clearly your appearance on the radio show, whilst they may have said, well, I don't exactly know who you are, your figures that you no doubt talked about, in that interview spoke for themselves, I think, in terms of the success.
I was reasonably modest. I was tempted not to be. But,
the biggest area of lack of knowledge is in the traditional publishing area, because it's not everywhere within it, but we've certainly had a couple of voices in the last few months that have been. In fact, a very common one I get when I talk about independently publishing, it says, you talk about an editor. Say, well, where do you get an editor from? As if anybody just goes to a Word document, uploads their book, and there's a lack of understanding the trad industry, that they go through the same process. Books go through the same process, and we've had a little bit. I wonder how you react when you hear some of the traditional voices saying that the loss of the gatekeeper is a bad thing for readers, because it's exposing them to books that haven't gone through that long process of long lunches before the book finally arrives.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I think for many, certainly the authors I speak to, this has been hugely liberating. It's actually something which has enabled them to sort of just get on with publishing. Yeah, exactly. That's a classic example, and you hear so many examples, authors talking about the fact that they were trying to get published. There were people saying this isn't the right genre for this time, or we've already published these particular books, we don't need any more. All various reasons, which probably make perfect sense for those particular people, but from the author's perspective, it's, well, why is that holding me back? I just want to get on with it and let the reader decide actually who becomes successful, because it's all very well for one or two people to make a judgment, and they probably have a huge amount of knowledge and experience, but actually the people that really matter are the readers. And so being able to get on with it, I think, has been incredibly liberating for many authors. And as you say, actually, certainly the events that I go to, most independently published authors know very well how to find an editor, or they know who to ask. When it comes to cover design, you can go to events, you can read blogs, there's all sorts of ways in which you can find out about those things. So I don't think from an independent publishing author's perspective any of this is a secret. I think actually it's just a fact of life when you're publishing.
Yeah, funny enough, I was on Radio 4 as well, faced with this on You and Yours a little while ago, faced with this exact argument, and I flipped it on its head and made the point that every J.K. Rowling, every Ian Rankin will tell you how many rejection letters they got.
Absolutely.
Now, those people had the tenacity to get through it, but how many brilliant writers fell at that stage? How many we've never heard from, never seen their books, but actually in this day and age we now do. So for me it was, as you say, liberating is the great word for it, I think.
Yeah, and I think the processes, the tools that you have are so simple now, and it's so easy to sort of be independently published. Probably the biggest sort of point of debate is, am I going to do this? As an author, am I going to spend the time to write this book, to dedicate a lot of time to crafting something I want to publish? Because once you get to that point of thinking, yes, I am, and I have now got a finished product, the rest of it is relatively straightforward. Yeah.
It's actually quite hard writing a book, isn't it?
Exactly.
I'm discovering.
Yeah. Let's not get Darren started on that. Darren has been telling me he's going to write a book for a couple of years, and I always bug him. So.
Yes.
It's really hard.
It is, exactly that. And I learned from Mark's example, sort of being on a train, commuting into work, you think, I've got this time to write a book, whereas Mark was very diligent and got the book written. I tend to fall asleep, so that's obviously what slows me down.
He's an outlier. Okay.
So we mentioned the kind of awareness. So we go to the London Book Fair and other events. So there's a great event in Dublin not too long ago that had a big audience. It's easy for us in our little self-publishing bubble, if you like, to assume that everyone knows what we know, and to assume that everyone knows that it's possible to publish in a way that has nothing to do with vanity publishing and all of that kind of stuff. So how far do you think the message has spread? Do you think let's say there's 100 writers, do you think 10 of them now know that this is a viable option, or more or less?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think it's one of those things where awareness continues to grow, but I still think there's more that can be done. And I think the really interesting thing is the way that the tools and the processes are becoming so simple, actually. And to the point you sort of made, there are many people who have probably only had in their back of their mind the idea that they might become a writer, they're the people that actually could be incredibly enthused by the ease of the process and just by actually taking up the opportunity now. So you sort of think about the author community as it is today, then yes, there may be different levels of awareness, whether you're traditionally published, whether you're independently published, or whatever it might be, but actually there's a really interesting opportunity for lots of different types of people to publish stories for them. And it's not always about becoming a #1 bestseller, it's not always about getting to a chart or making £1 million £1 million or whatever it might be. It's just the incredible sort of sense of achievement to just publish a book and have some people read it, and and ideally leave some great reviews. And why not? I mean, there's this terrible cliche that we always mention. Everyone's got this book in them. Why not? And as long as you're realistic about what you want to do and how you want to be involved with it, then why not?
And we shouldn't be afraid to talk about the money as well. Keeping a significantly larger percentage of the sale price of the book is a quicker route to the kind of liberation that Mark's enjoyed of quitting his job. And it is more difficult to do that traditionally published. You have to sell. The maths is simple. You have to sell a lot more books to have that kind of income. So
yes, absolutely. So you've got a lot of experience and a lot of, you've been on the ground for a long time now. So what's the best story that you've from an author's perspective that you've heard?
Wow, I mean, there's so many. Yours.
Don't mention him. Come on.
Sorry. But yes, I mean, yours is one that I'm constantly referring to, because it is one of those that, I mean, clearly you've put a huge amount of work into this, and you shouldn't underestimate just how much focus you've had on the writing and on the business side. But that classic situation, somebody on a train commuting into work, sort of having some thought about wanting to publish a book and making it happen is incredible. And there are so many others. I mean, somebody we've spoken to many times, Louise Ross, LJ Ross, is a classic example of being on a train, looking out a window, seeing, in her case, Lindisfarne Island, thinking somebody should write a book set there. Actually, why don't I write that book set there? That's a fabulous story, because it's something that everybody will no doubt have done in their lives, just looked out a window and thought, that's interesting. And there are many, many others, and I think the great thing is that these examples, it's not like there was some sort of unique sort of epiphany that only you could have experienced. It's the sort of situation that anybody could have been in. Now, it takes a certain tenacity to make it happen, but anybody could be in that situation. And I think that's what's really inspiring. And that's what's really inspiring for me in the work that I do, is I get to meet people like you and many other authors every day, and every story is just think, isn't that incredible? That person's taken the opportunity and made it work for them. And as I say, it's not always necessarily about saying, great, thank you, I've got to number one. It's just 50 people have downloaded my book. Isn't that amazing? And if that's what you're looking for, that is amazing.
I can remember very vividly, actually. This is going back to 2012 now. I remember the first time I had a sale that I didn't think was from someone who I knew.
Your mum.
My mum, buying lots of copies. That was a pretty amazing moment. Then the first time someone I didn't know signed up to my mailing list, or left a review, and those are kind of small waypoints along the journey, but they were, at the time, they were as exciting as getting a traditional deal or seeing my print books on storefronts and that kind of thing. So,
and I think that's one of the key things, as an author, as an aspiring author, as a budding author, to think about what it is that you want. Because yes, you could think, okay, I want to be the world's most famous author. That's clearly a very big challenge to set yourselves. It may be I just want to sell 10 copies to people that I don't know and get maybe 1 or 2 customer reviews. And there's obviously a myriad of things in between those 2 points. And just sort of work accordingly, and that would determine part of your sort of strategy, as it were, in terms of publishing, is what do I want to get out of this as an author, therefore what am I prepared to put into it?
Yeah, that's something we often refer to on the podcast, isn't it? And Joe Penn summed it up with that key question you have to ask yourself is, what does success look like to you?
Exactly.
And once you've answered that, a lot of things become easier. It brings a focus to where you're going.
So you mentioned strategy. So we have to take. I'm going to stand in for James here. This is where James gets his money's worth. So James is a new author, just putting working through his first book. Hopefully he'll get it. He's very lazy. But hopefully he'll get ready by the end of the year. So what would your advice be to writers like James and who are thinking now, how should I publish my book? And maybe a comment on traditional, and also then what the options available independently.
I think one of the key things to bear in mind is to spend that time getting the book right. And I think because the publishing process can be so quick and so simple, there's almost like a tendency to want to get to that as quickly as you can. But you really have to spend the time making the book as strong as you can and being really proud of it. And I think that's one of the things that we often often hear from authors, is making sure you've got the edit right, making sure you're really happy with the cover design. And just because you can put it somewhere very quickly, don't think that the speed is the sort of the real aim. It's to put something out there that you can be proud of. So I think, yes, make the time, get the book right. And then, as we said, actually think about what your priorities are, and think about, do you want to do certain things yourself? We often hear from people who've written a book, but maybe they have a background in marketing, maybe they have a background in graphic design, whatever it might be, so therefore they want to do the cover design or they want to do their marketing plan. But equally, if there are certain areas that you're less comfortable with, do you want to try and outsource that? Do you want to hire somebody? Do you want to get some advice for those sorts of things? The author community, especially the independent author community, is incredibly sort of generous with its time and advice. To spend the time to sort of think about what you want and get lots of advice about how best to go about that. Because I think there's very rarely one solution that fits for everybody. It's usually a question of, well, this is the bit I want in this area, this is the bit I want from that area. That is the package that's going to work for me, and that's what I'm going to sort of go with. And then learn, and try and test. One of the great things about independent publishing is you have so much flexibility. So if you try a certain price point and you don't think it's working for you, then you can go back and change it. If you put up a product description and you think on reflection, maybe that's not quite saying to my readers what I'm trying and what I want to say, you can go back and change it. And so constantly see it as a learning process and sort of calibrate it in the ways that are going to work for you.
Do you? I mean, the two strands to the business and the authoring both have their challenges. You must come across people. I mean, the way you described yourself at the beginning of somebody surrounded by books and from a family that were readers and had books everywhere, I think some people might be a little surprised to think of you in Amazon. Probably the detractors think they're full of young kids who don't care about they see it as a product. It's a digital business, and some people do look at it rather negatively. Actually, you obviously adore books, and you come from that area, and you almost represent the person who might struggle with the business side of things, might struggle with all the technology. You obviously don't. You work in the heart of it, but that must be something you readers talk to you occasionally and say, well, I just don't understand it.
From a reader's point...
Sorry, I meant writers.
Right,
writers,
yes,
just, I don't understand it.
Absolutely. I mean, with any profession, you have people in sort of all sorts of different sort of backgrounds, sort of looking at how they work within that profession. I think we're certainly something we're very mindful of is we're always looking to try and make the tools and the processes as simple as possible and try and explain them as clearly as possible. But of course, you have to deal with people with a lot of different backgrounds, and so it's not like a finished process where you think, okay, that's done, it's really simple, we can now move on. We're constantly listening and trying to see how we can make things even better. But I think, again, as an independent author, you have the choice. So if you're thinking, I want some technical advice about how to design a cover, let's say, then you have that opportunity. It's not that you have to do it in one particular way. Similarly, with the marketing side of things, there are plenty of people out there who will give you lots of advice about how to market. Now you need to listen. You can listen to that advice and decide whether it's right for you. But there's lots of help out there to help you make those decisions. So whilst you're independently publishing, and there's that sense to think, okay, I'm an individual publishing on my own, actually there's a huge community out there that you can engage with. Equally, if the idea of talking to any other person about your book is something you desperately don't want to do, then you don't have to either. You can work on your own and make it happen in the way that you want. So it's one of those things where, again, you decide. It's for you to make that choice.
Okay, so a few closing questions now. So just in terms of best practice, so what would you say is the error that you see most often in terms of books that are coming up on the platform?
I don't know. In terms of errors, I think the advice that we often hear is make sure that you have sort of spent time researching what you're doing. Treat it as a business. I mean, Mark, this is something I think you've said many times. Treat it as a business and treat it seriously if you want to sort of make a big impact or make an impact with your publishing. So, think about your cover design, think about your product description. How's that going to work with your readers, and is it sort of conveying the messages that you want it to convey? I think the other thing is to sort of, again, think about how much work do you want to put into your publishing. We have all sorts of tools and processes. We have programs like KDP Select that you can use to sort of drive promotions. Many authors now are very busy, active on social media. If you are serious about trying to become a bestseller in however you choose to define that, then it's going to take some work, and so you need to think about sort of how that's going to happen. And you can't just sort of publish the book and then sort of sit back and think, great, I'll now wait, and next week I will be at number one and an international bestseller. So if they're the kind of things you're aiming for, then think about the plan, put a plan together and structure it as you would a business.
Yeah, that's good, very good advice. I mean, how many books are on the platform now live?
That's a very good question. Millions. I mean, when you look at the Kindle store in the UK, there are millions of books on the website, and and clearly, continues to grow.
And that's one of the things I think quite strongly, that there's almost certainly been the next great British novel has probably been published in the last 5 years, probably been published independently, and probably or might not be noticed because that author isn't comfortable with the marketing side of things. So you're right, it does need to be treated in a business-like fashion if you want to sell significant amounts of copies. So let's just say James is published and he wants to get Amazon's attention. So what would be the best way of doing that?
Well, I think the key thing is to get your readers' attention and sort of build a readership for your books. So I think the best ways of doing that are, again, assuming that you want to, is to sort of start talking to your readership, create a mailing list if that's what you want to do, sort of create a Facebook page if that's what you want to do. We're always looking, as everybody does, we're always looking at the charts. I mean, you mentioned earlier around sort of the nature of the people in the Amazon business and Kindle Direct Publishing. There are many, many book lovers here, and we're constantly sort of debating the great new read that you've read, or having an argument about a book that somebody loves and somebody else didn't quite sort of warm to. And so we're always looking at what's in our charts, and we're always looking at those authors that are seeing success. And the way that the Amazon website works is so much of it is driven by recommendation that's sort of tailored to the individual reader, the individual customer. And so if your book is being looked at by readers, is being bought by readers, that will enable our sort of recommendation systems to then recommend that book to other readers. And you can sort of see the snowball then building in terms of getting in front of even more readers. Thinking about whether you want to participate with something like Kindle Unlimited, so joining KDP Select, having that 90-day period of exclusivity in return for participating in KDP Select, having access to promotional deals, those sorts of things. All of that helps build that momentum and drive sales. So it's certainly well worth thinking about those.
Does the business, the way it's set up with the algorithms, etc., lend itself more to clearly defined genres than the kind of genre indefinable book?
That's a very interesting question. I think the whole idea of sort of having genre-based readers is becoming much more blurred now. I guess that idea that if you walked into a bookshop or into a library or into a physical location, you'd have to have a certain organisation to your shelving to sort of make it browsable. Online, you have infinite shelving, and as a reader, you get recommendations based on all sorts of different parameters. So I don't think it's as important, perhaps. But I think as an author, if you're trying, especially if you're starting out, if you're trying to find a readership for your books, then you probably do need to have a reasonably clear idea of what type of reader you're aiming for. And that might be genre-based, it might be lifestyle-based, it may be that you have written a book that you feel would be really interesting for young mums or retired people or whatever it might be. And so then your marketing strategy or your approach may differ if that's the sort of area that you're going for. Genre's part of it, but I wouldn't say it's all of it.
James is pitching for RAF veterans from the 60s who used to like Vulcan bombers.
It's not as narrow as you think.
I should actually warn you, we spoke to Alex Clark from Wildfire, from Headline, and James pitched his book, and now Alex wants to read the damn thing. So I'm sure before we leave the office today, James will be in your ear about getting
inundated with offers. Yeah.
Well, it's been really generous at the time you've given us, Darren. We've been speaking for about an hour, so I think we'll wrap it up there. So thank you once again for taking the time.
Yeah, and I remember what I said. It's really heartening to know that at the centre of this big digital transformational business is somebody who loves books and sees the technology as an enabler of matching readers to writers, which is how it should be seen. Yeah. So thank you for your time.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Darren Hardy at Amazon in London, or obviously one of the key guys in the UK for a large company. As you say, laid back guy, and fascinating to talk to him, talk to the horse's mouth. And they are such a large organisation that for most authors, they never get that kind of personal relationship that you've got with them, and that obviously for people like Adam Croft and yourself and people who've risen above the rest, if you like, the rest of us, that's a unique thing. But very good of them to come onto the podcast and share some of that background with us.
Yeah, they don't do it very often. I've only heard Darren on one podcast before, and I'm keen to get him on because there's obviously lots of things that we can ask him. And before we did the interview, I put out a message into our Facebook group and asked for people to send in questions they'd like us to put to them. And yeah, I think it's reasonable to say a fair number, perhaps half to 60% of those questions could have been termed negative questions.
Yeah.
Frustrations and why is it like this, and why can't Amazon do that, which is fair enough. And I think what I think about when I think about Amazon is they are the dominant player in the market, but I think they deserve that. They took a chance on the Kindle. However many years ago it was now, perhaps even pushing 8 or 9 years ago, they developed the technology. They developed the best self-publishing platform. The KDP is a very, very easy platform to use. It's much easier than almost all of the other ones. They've got the biggest reach. You can publish worldwide with the click of a button in literally 10 minutes, really, once your assets are in place. And that wouldn't have come cheap, taking a risk on a piece of new kit, especially when you see people saying, I'm never going to swap I love my print book, and I'm looking at my bookcase now with print books, and I love the smell of a book, and I love the feel of a book. And I was one of those doubtful, very late adopters. I didn't get to Kindle until quite late. But Amazon gambled on that, and okay, so now they're the biggest player, but they deserve to be. They no one else was putting their neck on the line and developing something like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's always the case, particularly I think it might be a British mentality. I often think of Coldplay as an example of this. If you do become a huge thing in your field, suddenly people decide they don't like you. And it's an odd thing about Coldplay. You probably don't know them. But if you mention Coldplay, within 30 seconds, someone around you will say, I hate Coldplay.
I hate Coldplay.
Yeah, there you go. And I think it's because they're successful. Because if I mentioned Jesus and Mary Chain, it's unlikely someone would say, I hate Jesus and Mary Chain. They just wouldn't say it because they're not successful. When and Amazon are dominant and successful, you're always going to get some detractors because that's part of human nature. But they do it well. And as you say, they had a vision. And I'm probably one of those people who sat around the table where we used to work in the BBFC when they said people aren't going to be buying DVDs and Blu-rays in the future. And I took a while to be convinced that, you should invest in this area, but there was no hesitation in Jeff Bezos' household where he decided this was almost certain, as far as he was concerned, going to be the way it's going, and they put their eggs in that basket, and boy, it's paid off.
Yeah, as we say in Salisbury, haters gonna hate.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Amazon is an enormous company. Obviously, let's say something blindingly obvious. They're an enormous company with enormous revenues. I've been to see their distribution centre in Milton Keynes, and it would blow your mind how big it is. It is so vast, almost impossible to describe. And with that kind of success, inevitably will come questions, and authors who are frustrated that they can't make their book sell. Sometimes they'll lash out and blame the platform rather than perhaps blame the book. Maybe it's a book problem, or maybe it's a marketing problem. So I think it's Amazon doesn't get everything right. I mean, there are issues with KU. I'm not in Kindle Unlimited for a number of reasons. The system has been scammed a bit recently by people uploading garbage, basically, and then click farming all the way to the end of the book, so they get the per pages read thing. And unfortunately, Amazon is trying to deal with that. It's a difficult problem to solve, and in the kind of the sweep up, some innocent authors have been caught up and had their books pulled, and that's not great. There have been cases where kind of slightly unpleasant automated emails go out when perhaps wouldn't necessarily have been the thing to do. And that's an economy of scale thing. It would be very difficult for Amazon to employ 100,000 customer service helpers to deal with those problems. I think a level of automation is necessary. You can usually get things appealed. You can usually reach a person by replying to those emails and get things fixed. Yeah,
it is without question. It's the number one struggle for companies that just grow to that scale is keeping some sort of personal. You can deal with the routine. It's dealing with things that are slightly outside the routine that becomes very people intensive. I've been on the wrong side of eBay a couple of times, innocently trying to sell something and innocently selling something. Sellers decide to return it on spurious grounds, even though the description was accurate. And on both occasions, they immediately have ruled against me because they've just made this blanket decision that they're going to. So, and if you Google this, I'm not the only one. I won't sell on eBay anymore, and I think they have struggled to do that, struggled to bridge that gap. Why are you laughing? I'm
just thinking about your James Blatch adult toys.
That was not what I was selling. It was a MacBook Pro. Anyway, so but my feeling with Amazon is that they make earnest attempts to try and do that, and I know it's frustrating, and there will be people listening to this podcast who have had their accounts shut down through no fault of their own and then struggled to get repairs. But
probably not, actually. You don't hear that very often. That kind of draconian shutdown is very unusual. They may have had issues that have needed to be remedied. One thing to say is, I mean, a really good way, if people are in London and they're going to the London Book Fair, obviously we'll be there.
Yeah.
One thing I would recommend is Amazon will be there. Probably, I haven't had it confirmed yet, but I think it's at the in the Author HQ, and they have a lot of staff there. Darren will be there, and they are very approachable, very open to people going up to the stall, introducing themselves. Come and meet us. I'd be happy to introduce anyone to the guys at Amazon. It's a really good way just to get some advice from Amazon. It's they're very happy to reach out like that.
There's an opportunity to have a personal chat with someone from Amazon.
Yeah.
So talking of LBF, the London Book Fair, if you're coming over to the UK or you're in the UK and going to visit, we will be there for the 3 or 4 days of that week, and we're going to have a little get together on the Wednesday night. So we're going to announce the venue in our Facebook group. So if you join Ads for Authors, Self-Publishing Formula Ads for Authors Facebook group, we'll put it into all the groups. We'll give you the venue as soon as we've resolved that, but we will go out and buy some drinks for people who've come up and said hello and identified themselves as SPF community members by, what do we do? Is it one trouser leg rolled up and the secret handshake?
I need to work on that. Yeah, absolutely.
Copy of Mark Dawson's book.
And one of James's illicit products as well. You can wave your James Blatch love doll.
This is libelous. Do you know a lawyer?
Wait a minute, I'm a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. See yourself.
It's not libel if it's true. Anyway, move on.
That's one of the defence. Actually, that's not a defence of libel. The defence is you've got to be able to prove it. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. That's how courts work. Anyway, getting bogged down. Brilliant to have Amazon on the SPF podcast, and thank you very much indeed to them for taking their time. We'll definitely revisit that in the future. We've got some exciting stuff coming up. We're going to really delve deeply into some paid advertising areas, including AMS, the new platform on Amazon, but also Facebook ads. In the next few weeks. We've got a very exciting author interview coming up in the next few weeks as well with Holly Ward, one of the biggest selling romance authors on the planet, an absolutely lovely woman who does not do interviews very often and did a brilliant interview for us for SPF. So very exciting. Thank you so much indeed for listening. You can get all the podcasts back on our website, selfpublishingformula.com. You can email us, podcast@selfpublishingformula.com. And please do join our Facebook groups, our growing array of Facebook groups, whether specifically for your genre or generally for advice. So Ads for Authors is probably the main one. And what's the other one? Not Genius, because that's linked to the course. It's called 101. Is it called 101?
Yes.
So if you're just starting out like me, the 101 Facebook is probably the place to go. If you're established, you've released 1 or 2 books, you're getting into paid advertising, Ads for Authors is a very, very useful forum to have your covers critiqued, your blurb critiqued, and you dive in quite often, I notice, including on some quite big authors who post their covers and you say, yeah, I don't love any of them. But it's just the only useful way to be in that forum.
What's the point in battering someone up, be honest?
Yeah, but it's very useful, and that's one of the things we're most proud of really with SPF is you can do all of that for free, and it can really help your career. Thank you for listening. We're back next week.
You've been listening to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. Visit us at selfpublishingformula.com for more information, show notes, and links on today's topics. You can also sign up for our free video series on using Facebook ads to grow your mailing list. If you've enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. We'll see you next time.